Every 2 seconds, seeing a tweet, you have AIDS, go die. Oh,
What if one of the most
message.
disturbing stories in entertainment history wasn't hiding in secret at all? What if the clues were visible for years? What if millions of people saw them, talked about them, shared them online, and then simply moved on? And what if the real story isn't just about Sean Diddy Combs? What if it's about an entire culture that allowed powerful people to operate without meaningful scrutiny for decades? As lawsuits continue piling up against Diddy and new allegations keep emerging, attention has shifted far beyond a single individual. Investigators, journalists, former insiders, and everyday viewers have started looking backward. They're revisiting old interviews, old footage, old relationships, old warnings. And among all the names resurfacing in these conversations, one stands out for a particularly tragic reason. Aaron Carter, a child star who seemed to have everything: fame, money, success, millions of fans, but whose life slowly unraveled in front of the entire world. Today, many people are asking whether Aaron's story was simply another tragic celebrity downfall, or whether it reveals something much larger about the entertainment industry itself. And the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore the questions. Because this story isn't really about one person. It's about power, influence, protection, and silence. A lot of silence. To understand why Aaron Carter's name is appearing in conversations surrounding Diddy today, you first have to understand just how young Aaron was when he entered the spotlight. He wasn't a teenager. He wasn't even old enough to drive. He was a child, a literal child. Before most kids learn how to navigate middle school, Aaron Carter was navigating fame. Millions of records sold, television appearances, world tours, magazine covers, crowds screaming his name everywhere he went. From the outside, it looked like a dream, the kind of success most artists spend their entire lives chasing. But childhood fame comes with a hidden cost, a cost that often remains invisible until years later. Children are not designed to handle global attention. They're not prepared for constant judgment. They're not equipped to manage enormous wealth. And they're certainly not prepared to navigate industries filled with adults whose interests don't always align with their own. Yet year after year, child stars are expected to do exactly that: perform, produce, generate revenue, stay relevant, keep smiling, no matter what's happening behind the scenes. For Aaron Carter, that pressure never seemed to stop. As the years passed, the cheerful image the public once knew began cracking. Interviews became more troubling. Family conflicts became public. Personal struggles became impossible to hide. Fans watched him change. The media documented every step. Social media amplified every mistake. And slowly, the narrative shifted. The former child superstar was no longer being celebrated. He was being analyzed, criticized, mocked, and in some cases, exploited for entertainment. The documentary spends significant time examining this transformation, not simply as a personal tragedy, but as evidence of a larger system. A system that often profits from young talent while offering very little protection once problems begin appearing. One of the documentary's most uncomfortable observations is that Aaron's struggles weren't hidden. They happened in public. Millions witnessed them. Millions discussed them. Yet meaningful intervention seemed remarkably rare. Again and again, Aaron appeared in interviews discussing his problems, his fears, his frustrations, his battles with addiction, his mental health struggles, his family conflicts. At times, he seemed desperate to explain what he was experiencing. At other times, he appeared completely overwhelmed. But regardless of the specifics, one thing became increasingly clear. Something was wrong, very wrong. Yet despite years of public warning signs, the situation continued deteriorating. And that's where the documentary begins asking difficult questions. Questions that extend far beyond Aaron Carter himself. Why do people often notice warning signs only after tragedy occurs? Why are obvious red flags dismissed when someone is famous? Why does public concern frequently arrive years too late? The film suggests that fame creates a dangerous illusion. People assume celebrities are protected. They assume wealth equals safety. They assume success equals stability. But those assumptions are often completely wrong. In reality, many young performers exist within environments that prioritize profit over protection. And when problems emerge, those same environments frequently lack the tools or the willingness to intervene effectively. As attention turns toward Diddy, these broader concerns become even more significant. For years, Diddy represented one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. A mogul, a businessman, a cultural icon, someone whose influence extended across music, television, fashion, and media. His reputation wasn't built overnight. It was built over decades, which is precisely why recent allegations have generated such intense public interest. The documentary doesn't simply focus on the allegations themselves. Instead, it examines the environment surrounding them. The culture, the relationships, the power dynamics, the networks of influence, and perhaps most importantly, the silence. Again and again, the film returns to a recurring theme. People often knew pieces of the story. Very few knew everything. One person heard rumors. Another witnessed concerning behavior. Someone else noticed unusual patterns. Others simply chose not to ask questions. Individually, each piece appeared incomplete. Together, they formed a much larger picture. But because responsibility was dispersed across so many people, accountability became incredibly difficult. No single person felt responsible enough to act. And so the system continued operating. Year after year, decade after decade. The documentary argues that this pattern appears repeatedly throughout entertainment history. Not just in one case, not just with one celebrity, but across generations. Young performers entering adult-controlled environments. Powerful figures accumulating influence. Warning signs emerging. Concerns being dismissed. And silence filling the spaces in between. This is where references to Justin Bieber, Usher, and other artists begin appearing throughout the broader conversation. Not because the documentary makes direct allegations regarding every individual mentioned, but because their careers intersect with the same ecosystem, the same networks, the same circles of influence, the same industry structures. When multiple young stars move through similar environments, people naturally begin examining whether common patterns exist. The documentary encourages viewers to think critically about those patterns, not to jump to conclusions, not to assume guilt, but to ask questions, important questions, questions that perhaps should have been asked years ago. Another major theme explored throughout the film is the nature of influence itself. Most people imagine power as something obvious, a title, a position, an official role, but real influence often operates differently. It's informal, subtle, invisible. Powerful individuals rarely need direct control when everyone around them already understands their importance. Careers can depend on maintaining access. Opportunities can depend on staying in good standing. Relationships can become valuable currency. And under those circumstances, speaking out becomes increasingly difficult, especially when the target of criticism possesses extraordinary influence. The documentary suggests this dynamic helps explain why certain stories remain buried for so long. Not because nobody noticed, but because the costs of speaking up often seemed greater than the benefits. For many people, silence felt safer. Safer professionally, safer financially, safer socially. Unfortunately, silence rarely protects everyone equally. The people with the least power often pay the highest price. As Aaron Carter's struggles intensified, his life increasingly became a public spectacle. Interviews generated headlines. Social media clips went viral. Personal conflicts became entertainment. Every setback became content. Every crisis became another story. And somewhere within that endless cycle, the human being at the center of it all seemed to disappear. The documentary challenges viewers to reconsider how society responds to public suffering. When someone is visibly struggling, why do audiences often consume the spectacle rather than address the problem? Why does concern frequently transform into entertainment? Why do warning signs become viral moments instead of opportunities for intervention? These questions have no easy answers, but they remain deeply relevant, especially in an era where every breakdown can be shared instantly with millions of people. As legal proceedings surrounding Diddy continue unfolding, another significant shift has occurred. The conversation is moving beyond speculation. Court filings, witness testimony, official investigations, documented evidence. These developments represent something fundamentally different from internet rumors. And the documentary emphasizes this distinction repeatedly. Because regardless of public opinion, legal accountability requires evidence. It requires process. It requires scrutiny. The transition from speculation to investigation marks a critical turning point, one that many observers believe has been decades in the making. Throughout the film, 50 Cent's role is presented not as someone claiming to possess every answer, but as someone refusing to stop asking questions. Questions about accountability, questions about influence, questions about why certain stories remained untouched for so long. Whether viewers agree with every conclusion is ultimately beside the point. The larger issue is that conversations previously considered untouchable are now happening openly. And once those conversations begin, they're difficult to stop. Perhaps the documentary's most powerful message is that accountability isn't simply about punishing individuals. It's about examining systems, understanding environments, recognizing patterns before they produce tragedy. Because if society only pays attention after disaster strikes, then lessons arrive far too late. Aaron Carter's story serves as a painful reminder of that reality. For years, people watched. For years, people commented. For years, people speculated. Yet meaningful change never seemed to arrive. And today, many are left wondering what might have happened if concerns had been taken seriously sooner. Would anything be different? Could anything have changed? Or was the outcome inevitable once the system failed to protect the people who needed protection most? The documentary doesn't attempt to answer these questions definitively. Instead, it leaves viewers with something arguably more important: the responsibility to think critically, to question assumptions, to examine the structures that shape celebrity culture, and to recognize that fame should never be confused with safety. Because beneath every headline is a human being. Behind every scandal is a larger context. And behind every public tragedy are often years of ignored warning signs. As the credits approach, one final question remains. A question that lingers long after the documentary ends. If millions of people can witness warning signs in real time, if concerns can circulate for years, if stories can remain hidden in plain sight, then what does that say about the systems responsible for protecting vulnerable people? And perhaps more importantly, have those systems truly changed? Or are we destined to repeat the same cycle again? The answers may not arrive anytime soon. The investigations continue. The lawsuits continue. The debates continue. New information may still emerge. New perspectives may still surface. But one thing is undeniable. The conversation has changed forever. Questions that were once ignored are now impossible to avoid. Stories that were once dismissed are being re-examined. And a silence that lasted for years is finally beginning to break. Whether that leads to meaningful reform remains uncertain. But history has shown that real change begins with uncomfortable questions. Questions that challenge powerful institutions. Questions that challenge accepted narratives. Questions that force people to look beyond the headlines. And right now, those questions are louder than ever. So what do you think? Are these simply isolated tragedies connected only by coincidence? Or do they reveal deeper issues within the entertainment industry that have remained hidden for decades? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because some stories don't end when the cameras stop rolling. Sometimes, that's when the real story begins.